fill the air. At force 12, this thick white curtain blots out what little vision you had until then, and the sea under your hull seems like a heaving carpet of liquid snow. And you gasp in a force 12 because the wind hits your face at anything between 50 and 100 miles an hour. Merely to breathe, you have to turn your face away into the lee of your shoulder and make a pocket around your mouth with your hands. If you're on the North Atlantic Ocean in such a gale, and if the temperature is heading below the freezing point, and if much earlier, as the wind was building, you supposed the flecks of foam in the lengthening spindrift no more than pretty whitecaps, think again. As the wind climbs, do not stare at the ocean. It has now turned a lethal white that will feel like pins in your eyes. The view that you had gazed on earlier when it was green on grey or blue on blue, and calm or heaving gently or even thumping in a swell, this has become a foaming, pulsating ice field. But the sight is so compelling, so liquid, so fast and savage, and in the daytime has a light so beautiful and preternatural that you'd almost risk the stabbing blindness just to glance at it. In which case, you will expose yourself to further danger. The gale can pick up a knob of that white foam, freeze it, and skim it over the waves. It might as well be a steel arrowhead. The salt compressed in that glassy shard of ice will flay your skin to the cheekbone as though a savage had aimed it straight at your face. Any seafarer out in such conditions knows to wrap up, turn away, and, only if essential, negotiate the decks of his vessel with the care of a tightrope walker. Otherwise, stay inside. Those who have a right to be out there, the gulls and the whales and the other marine species, it's their home. Man is the one who is mortally out of his element. In late December 1951, the upper reaches of the Beaufort scale took control of Captain Kurt Carlsen and his ship as though they were the playthings of the winds. He was 37 years old, and his cargo vessel, Flying Enterprise, had fallen foul of a hurricane in the North Atlantic. She listed grievously, far over on her port side. Dense green waves lashed her tilting decks, and a thick veil of that opaque white spray hung in the air, cloaking visibility and deepening the darkness. With her masts bent and her radio antenna in shreds, the black freighter rolled in pain like a dying beast. Now Carlsen had to deny this biblical tempest any further gains. He had to save the lives of his 10 passengers and 40 crew. One of his lifeboats had been shattered. It swung loose and useless like a broken limb. The other hung too close under the listing hull to be launched safely. He sent out a mayday, and a variegated fleet of ships from all around his part of the ocean changed course and steamed towards him to help. When they arrived, Carlsen then gave the order that no master ever wants to give: abandon ship. The crew led the 10 frightened passengers out of the cabin block of Flying Enterprise onto a deck that tilted at an angle of 60 degrees on a ship dipping so low that her masts, what remained of them, sometimes touched the sea, a broken, out-of-control vessel that might go down in a sucking vortex at any moment. The passengers, 4 men, 5 women and a boy, slipped and slid here and there. Nobody could walk across those slanting decks without tumbling down far and fast. Instead, each movement required a lurch as far as the next handhold, the stays of a hatch cover, the nearest stanchion, a length of pipe. As the passengers grabbed, they held on so fast that they seemed stuck to these metal fitments. And they needed to cling, otherwise the surges that kept pounding over the ship would swipe them off like debris. Not one of these people, passengers or crew, not even the captain himself, had ever been subjected to anything so relentless and fierce as the weather of those chilling December days. Earlier, Carlsen had addressed the passengers. In an unpanicked voice, he'd told them that they had fallen into great peril and that their best hope lay in embracing further danger. They would have to jump into the roaring waves. Mutely, they had prepared to do what they were told. Now that their moment had come, Carlsen selected as the first to jump overboard a German woman in her early 50s named Elsa Müller. She would fulfill the sailor's traditional injunction for women and children first. Her example would inspire. Who could dare refuse to follow this modest wife and mother? Frau Muller reached the ship's rail, gripped it, and, hand over hand, inched her way along to where the captain stood, under the lifeboat he couldn't deploy. She wore only a nightdress under her coat. All her other clothes had been ruined by the storm when it burst into her cabin. The bitterly cold ocean swept over her bare legs again and again. On the deck above, her family watched, fearing for her life. Kurt Buller, a man of deep Christian faith, had been questioned more than once by the Gestapo, and so had a working knowledge of fear. Beside him stood the Muller's 19-year-old daughter, Leanne, and 12-year-old son, Lothar. Captain Carlsen, calm and matter-of-fact, handed Frau Muller one end of a rope. The other end ran down to the surface of the water, where it disappeared into the swell. Carlsen, fluent in German, told Frau Muller that a lifeboat from a rescue ship standing nearby waited on the other end of this line, that the boat had already come in, had thrown the rope aboard the ship, and would presently come back for her. From where she stood at the rail, this quiet, obedient woman saw no rescuers. But Else Muller understood how to make a leap of faith. She had, after all, embarked on this voyage to create a new life in the New World. With the Mormons in Salt Lake City, every possession that the family owned in the world was stowed in the flooded holds below, 12 pieces of modest luggage. And she had now placed her life in the hands of this young sea captain with the level voice and strong Danish accent. Carlsen helped Else Muller clamber onto the rail, where she sat looking out at the terrifying sea. The rope trailed from her hand, and still no boat materialized through the spray. The captain delayed and delayed her jump, waiting until Flying Enterprise came up again briefly from the almost horizontal pitch to which she had rolled. Then, through the spray, Carlsen saw the lifeboat, tapped Else Muller's shoulder, and called out a blessing. Part 1. Chapter 1. In the National Archives of the United States in Washington, D.C., lies a dense report, several inches high, of typed papers, on top of which rests a separate summarizing document 10 pages long. This is the record of the Marine Board, convened to investigate subject casualty, together with its findings of fact, opinions, and recommendations. Dated February the 26th, 1952, and signed by P.A. Ovenden, Chief of the Merchant Vessel Inspection Division in the United States Coast Guard, this official prose contains no hint of the magic energy that conceives a legend. Mr. Ovenden's conclusions, sent by the Coast Guard to the Chief of Merchant Marine Safety, begin by observing that a welded freighter named SS Flying Enterprise departed from Hamburg, Germany for New York on the 21st of December 1951, loaded, among other things, with 762.6 tons of pig iron in number 2 lower hold and 508 tons of pig iron in number 4 hold. Flying Enterprise, a freighter in the class known as C-1B, was built in the Wilmington Yards at Los Angeles by the Consolidated Steel Corporation and released from the shipbuilder's yard to the Warshipping Administration on the 18th of March 1944. The man who stamped her brass registration plate made an error in the date, and his original 1943 is overstamped with 1944. She had the registration number 245133 and the combined signal and radio call sign KWFZ. After the war, she went in January 1946 to the U.S. Maritime Administration, where she was named Cape Kumikaki. On the 25th of April 1947, Cape Kumikaki became one of 12 vessels in the Isbranson Line out of New York, owned by a buccaneering Scandinavian Hans Isbranson, who, to echo the old sailing clippers, used the prefix flying for all his cargo ships. He had accumulated his fleet largely by purchasing at bargain prices from the U.S. Navy those ships no longer required for the transport of wartime supplies. For this, his competitors in the bare-knuckle freight shipping business disliked him, largely because he had stolen a march on them. His son, Jakob Isbranson, thinks today that Flying Enterprise must have been one of the last of the C-1B class, They weren't great freighters. They were too small and too slow. Yet